I'm Jen West, professional rebel of delight.
And I'm Dave Wiesdock, sage of creative scaffolding.
And this is shadow casting. Good day, audience. It's time for another shadow cast. And today we're going to be talking about kind of a deep dive into a podcast we did before. We talked about awareness and mindfulness. And we're kind of going to get a little nitty gritty into the mindfulness side. And it was really funny, Dave, when we were originally talking about this and molding it together, I wasn't quite sure how we could take the energy of it and put it into words. And then just this last Friday, I was in my bog walk class and we were doing what is called circle walking. And if you've watched Legends of Korra, you've seen them walking in their circles, doing different things, airbending, all that good stuff. But you walk in the circle and the focus is supposed to be on the center of the circle. And then you just put your mind into your body and you just walk that circle and you change directions and you do the different aspects of it. And the goal is to bring attention to your body. And I was walking in the circle and I thought everything was good. It felt good. My body felt like it was in the right place. And as I'm circling around, I put my awareness, my mind into my body around my chest area. And I just set it there. And I'm walking in that circle. And all of a sudden, I felt my shoulders shift as if I was leaning in originally, like an airplane doing circles. You know how one wing is lower and the other wing is up? I felt my shoulders even out as I was walking in this circle. And I had no awareness that they were off at all. None. I thought my body had the right posture, but putting my intention into the middle of my body woke something up in my body that I was not aware of, and it modified itself. Anyway, just a strange story to lead into this idea of awareness, attention, and intention. And just the fact that attention has so much power, just giving something your full attention. And so today, Dave and I are going to dive into this topic and try to make it a little more practical, a little more useful, and give mindfulness some teeth so that you can actually use it. So we hope you enjoy this podcast. And yeah, Dave, we're going to have fun today. Yeah?
We're going to have so much fun. I love that tie-in. You know, I think outside of it just being a great story, it just shows how yours and my brain kind of works with all this. You know, it isn't just a podcast conversation that we have once a week that our audience gets to listen to. This is something that you and I are like constantly actively looking at, trying to breathe into, being curious around, finding ways that we can apply it. We talk about some of this stuff passively, I guess I want to say. We go, oh, this thing kind of happened to us and it reminded me of this topic. And so let's discuss it. And we find some great ground to it and meet in those conversations. But it's when we have these kind of topics where you're embodying it. And I've said this the past few podcasts too, there's just something like chef's kiss about it, like just so nuanced and juicier, because when you can like really feel it in your body, to me, that opens up something that doesn't quite happen when you logically work something out. When you can bring it into your body and it's something experienced and felt, there's this door that unlocks or a gate that opens. And I feel personally like that makes you more aware of how this shows up in other areas in your life. And for me, that's so much fun because then that becomes the play. And we talk about that a lot in our shadow casting, like playing with how we cast ourselves out to the world. One of the ways we do that is by bringing attention internally. And are our shoulders even? How do we carry ourselves? Those kind of things. So that's just a really great way to like dig into this topic. And I'm so excited that we're revisiting awareness and mindfulness and digging into attention and intention and playing with the idea of getting into some more practical uses of how this shows up.
Yeah.
So,
and it shows up all the time. You're going to find throughout this podcast that we are going to use a lot of examples because it is embodiment and it's really hard to put into words. but we have examples that exemplify how we use these different words because the concepts just don't get it. You have to have an example that you've lived. We can go, oh, that thing. Because otherwise we're creating another word with another definition that isn't livable. So,
Right.
so it's going to be example day for the podcast.
Ooh, I like that. Example day.
Hey.
So let's really dig into the awareness side of this first. I think that that's a great sort of inroad into this topic. And we were talking about this a little bit when we put on clothing items, a jewelry, a watch, for example. When I was in Cairo school, we learned a lot about this. And so, I got to just nerd out for like 30 seconds. What we learned is like, for example, when I put on a shirt in the morning, I feel the shirt on my body. Like I'm aware that I am wearing a shirt. I can feel how it falls over my shoulders, over my stomach, how far it hangs over my gut. but you know where like the shirt fits, and if it's a little too tight, a little too big. You have those kind of awarenesses and intention around the shirt. But what we learned in Cairo school is that our brain after a while shuts off that signal and goes, okay, I know you're wearing the shirt. I don't need to keep telling you you're wearing the shirt. And the reason for that is like mental load, right? If our brain constantly had to tell us what we were wearing and we had to be aware of 100% of the time what we were wearing, it would prevent us from being aware and attentive of things around us. And so our brain makes decisions for us and shuts those little notifications off, let's say. And what's cool and what we're going to dive into is while that is and can be a useful hack for us, sometimes digging back into that is worthwhile. Sometimes reminding ourselves we're wearing that shirt is important in life. And a fun way of thinking about this is you might, if you're out in public, of course, you're usually wearing a shirt going to the grocery store or whatever, and someone says, hey, nice shirt. That's where I think awareness and attention kind of funnily comes in, because then I have to look down and go, well, what shirt am I wearing? Like I'm bringing attention back to the shirt, right? You're like, thanks, but I'm a graphic tee kind of guy, So I've got 100 of these shirts. I've worn them 100 times. So I have to bring attention back to what shirt I'm wearing and go, which one am I wearing? Is it a Star Wars shirt? Is it a Pokemon shirt? Is it nerdy? Is it my Taylor Swift hoodie?
Those are the strangest interactions with people. When somebody comes up to me and references the shirt I'm wearing, and I have completely forgot or didn't care when I grabbed it, that it had words on it that people are commenting about.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like they tell you something because it's a Star Wars shirt, and they're like, "Is the Force with you today?" And you're like, "Wait, what? Huh? What?" And then you're like, "Oh, my shirt, got it."
Right. You're like, do I know you? But yeah, exactly. So it's that kind of thing. It's like those little moments that bring our awareness and attention back to something we're wearing or something that's on us. And you might even remember in the morning what shirt you put on, but as the day goes on, you've received new information. You're processing other data, and your brain's moved on from that too. So your attention has shifted. And when things are called out, your attention is brought back to it. The shirt's a fun example, but sometimes we get poked on things. Sometimes our attention is brought on things that we might otherwise want to forget. I think that's what we're kind of going to dig into today. But before I jump like too far ahead, you had a really great example, I think, with like a watch. So I think that's
Yeah, it's the same sort of idea as with the shirt. So you put your watch on in the morning, and much like the shirt, you feel how it fits on your arm, and maybe it's just uncomfortable or whatever. But then as time goes on, you lose track of it. And it's just a part of who you are. It's out of your awareness. And at some point, you want to know what time it is. And so you bring your attention back to that watch to take the time to do that. And the awareness is knowing the watch is there, bringing that attention back gives you the awareness again. And looking at the watch and telling the time and making decisions with it is your intention. I don't remember if that's exactly the same story I had before.
no, it is. And I think that that's another great example. And we're kind of sticking in the item of clothing area, but this is important because we're building the analogy, right? Like
Right.
for our audience, I think it's worth the storytelling adventure here. And
Right.
so, like we were talking about, you're right. So when you wear the watch, why do we wear watches? We wear watches to tell time. Sometimes we have the smart watches now, and so we use it for exercise and biometric
Yeah.
feedback and those
Yeah, I
kinds.
want to know how busy I've been through the day. Like, have I gotten any steps today? I feel like I've been sitting in front of a computer all day long, and I look down and I've got 3,000 steps, and it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm like, oh dear God, I got to get outside. Yeah. Well, and here's the funny thing: sometimes we have no awareness of something. So go back to our watch example, and we have no awareness of it, but our attention wakes up to the fact that we have been sitting, and it brings awareness back to our watch, especially if it's a smartwatch. So we have our attention and we have, oh, how long have I been sitting? And our awareness goes, we have a watch for that. So we've got three words we're playing with. We're off on a tangent. We have awareness, which we've talked about before. We have attention, and we have intention. So we're going to try to enunciate today, since attention and intention sound quite a lot alike. Here's how this plays back into our last podcast. Awareness is its own thing. And then the podcast we talked about before, we talked about mindfulness. And Dave and I really feel that mindfulness has those two components of attention and intention inside of it. It's what makes it useful and practical. So if you go back to the old one, you have awareness and mindfulness, and we are breaking down mindfulness into attention and intention.
I love that you created that nuance. I think that's going to be really important as we continue forward. However, I don't want to let one really big point that you hit on get away from us. And I think that this is, again, sort of where my brain has been, where my attention has been. Going back to that example with the smartwatch, it was our body, right? Our body told us, hey, in some way, either maybe a stiff neck, our low back starts hurting, our feet get a little numb because, we've been sitting for so long. That's usually the trigger that comes up with, oh, when's the last time I've stand? When's the last time I've taken a few steps? When's the last time I've stretched a little? When's the last time I got a drink of water? Our body brings our attention back to focus, back to awareness of what's going on around us, what's happening inside of us. And so our body can be a great, I don't want to say colleague isn't the right word, aid. Our body can be a great insight and a great tool to help us play with attention and intention and learning where our focus has been or where our focus isn't.
Yeah. Well, and the interesting thing with us as humans in this day and age is we don't pay attention to anything unless it's a thought that comes up. That's when it grabs us. And so when the body talks to us, we're not really noticing it. We have very little awareness of our bodies. Even I, who do a lot of movement and practice martial arts, I did not know I was listing in like a plane turning until my body just corrected. And it actually goes into, if you listen to our quote cast last week, those two parts of selves, self one and self two, the thinking, the critical, the dissecting. That's the one we normally pay attention to. And then our body, which is the doer. And my body actively, once I put my mind into my body and away from thoughts, it fixed itself. It did what it needed to do. And then I had a new awareness and something else that I could intentionally focus on moving forward. Am I keeping my shoulders where they need to be? Am I looking over my shoulder? Am I looking down at my feet? That's a bad habit of mine. That does not work in a fight. You can't be looking at your feet while you're fighting.
Yeah, it's like, hold on a minute. Before I throw this punch, let me just see where my feet are.
Yeah. Let me get my steps right and get them into the right place.
Can you just stand there real quick? Thanks.
Hold still, hold still.
So, I think that's a great intro to attention and awareness. So when we shift the focus a bit to intention, let's go back to the watch because I think that that's a great analogy that fits in both worlds, right? So the watch for awareness and attention is when we put it on, or what's it helping us focus on. Intention is more of an active process. There's a little bit more forward planning involved. And so, for example, when you wear a watch, you might intend to look at it every hour to track your steps, to track your water intake, to track your activity, to check a text message, to see what the time is. Those are can all be sort of intentions of how you want to use the watch. The other way that it can work is, let's say you have a work meeting at 10 a.m. down the street, and you know that you need to get there by 9:55, so you need to leave yourself. You intend to leave 15 minutes early to intend to give, because you expect the traffic or whatever is going to take so long to get you from point A to point B. And so you're using the watch with the intention of helping you keep track of time, so you leave on time to make your meeting on time. Where this sort of ties in then is your attention takes a backseat, because you are starting to create a mental model in your head. You're forward projecting a bit how the events are going to go. You're going to get in your car, you're going to get to your destination, you know you're going to have to get through X amount of lights or whatever. Or maybe you know that you're going to have to get around rush hour or traffic, or maybe there's an accident. All these things can start to build this picture of intention, this idea of how you want the future to go, or how you're expecting something to turn out.
Yeah. Yeah, you're
And
stepping into the activeness of it. So you look at the watch, you realize you've been sitting forever, and then you have the intention to get up and you start moving, and it starts to cascade out.
right. And so taking this a step further, then you're in the car, right? You're driving to your destination. And as you're driving, and especially as you've been driving for a long time, you start to autopilot, especially if it's where you know you're going. You know where your lights are, you know where the car needs to turn. And especially if you've driven the road a ton of times, you might even know what side of the lane you need to be in, what lane's faster or slower, those kind of things. And all those things are mini calculations that over time your brain has turned from attention to intention, because it's passive, it's habitual, it's unconscious. And that's where I think this power comes in, because a lot of times, if you're listening to the podcast right now and you just drove somewhere, not if you're driving right now, please, but if you have driven somewhere in the past, think about it today. Let's say you drove to go get coffee. Do you know every light you hit? Do you know every car you saw? Do you know which lights you stopped at and which lights you got through? Maybe. Chances are probably not, because a lot of it happened unconsciously. It was in the subconscious. And so what happens is, when we're driving in that kind of autopilot mode, the only real way we get shaken out of it is if there's something that interrupts that flow of intention, that flow of unconscious intention. Something jumps out in front of the car, someone swerves in front of you, somebody cuts you off, a squirrel runs out in the road, you know? And so what happens is, as our attention is forced forward, forced back to front of mind, it kicks us out of unconscious intention. And then we have to make a choice outside of what we had intended. And I just got the brain blast of, yeah. So that's exactly why this model works so well, because it's forcing out an intention, and putting us in a tension. And when we're in attention or attention and awareness, that's where we can start to create space. That's where things are allowed to expand. And so the thing though is that it's so subtle, and really I feel shadow casting happens from that space. When we can get into awareness, when we can get into attention, that's where our power comes from in our lives.
Yeah, so that's where we're going with this podcast today. We're going to take these subtle things in our life that happen just naturally to us. We focus our attention when something is different. We have awareness of stuff for a while until it becomes mundane. We set an intention and start moving through it, and then our attention takes over and it modifies our intention. So we get woken back up, and then we can make modifications and change our routes. But we're shadowcasters. We're on a personal growth journey. We're trying to turn these natural tools into mindfulness. And mindfulness means we practice getting our attention more active more of the time when it's mundane and tedious because it opens us up to using our intention better. It allows us to set that direction and move through. But if we stay aware, things can change, things can shift. We have more power, we notice more, and it lets us move better. And that's why we're just hacking on these words right now, because once you know the words, once you know the energy of them, you can practice them because you know how they feel. You know what it means to focus your attention down, and then you know how to use that to make steps, not goals way out in the future. That's a different tool. The goal, the intention gets you there. So getting to your business meeting, there's the goal. The intention are the steps you're taking along the way. And attention, one, keeps you out of reaction, and it keeps you out of emotional distress, because intention that's set and unconscious kind of turns into an expectation where it's just out there and it should just happen and you don't have to worry about it. And if anything gets in the way, stress, and it's wrong and it shouldn't happen. And you get into all those other words: should, could, shoulda, coulda, woulda,
Yep.
whatever. But if you stay in attention, if you're able to keep that going more and more of the time, your intentions get quicker and they modify quicker, and things aren't a hassle because your awareness stays engaged.
Yeah, that to me, that's really the end goal, right? Is to be this masterful, aware neo matrix movement where everything slows down around you because you're just so aware, you're in the moment. I would say you're almost outside of intention and attention. You're in just this bubble of awareness. This You're open to life and you're connected to things. And what I believe happens is as we move into awareness, we become this sort of go with the flow, but as things change, you're able to just change with it. It's this idea of the serendipity. As we start to move with life, life moves with us. It's when we start to project our intentions and we allow our unconscious intentions to drive us that we start to feel that life is controlling us or that we don't have control within our lives. But the truth is that we've just put things on autopilot that are running our life, and we still have the choice to change those autopilot sort of directives.
Yeah, and it's not looking for nuance either. And that's what it is when the autopilot's running, it's just on the habit. It's like, I just do these steps, but I don't care about anything that's happening. Serendipity happens when you're a part of the process. Just like when I put my attention into my body, it corrected itself. It felt almost serendipitous because my brain wasn't telling me to do it. My brain didn't say this is wrong, correct it. My body said this is more appropriate and did it. It just said this is the way that it would work better. And attention brought that around. There wasn't any thought that kicked in of a right and wrong. It fixed itself. And that's what serendipity is, when your brain has attention and it's focused on something, good, bad, or indifferent. You get things that happen that bring more of that into your life. Normally, we only use serendipity when it's on the happy side of that. But it's the same thing. If bad things are happening and more just keep on coming, there's something in your attention and your focus that you need to.
Yeah, exactly. And tying this back into the car example, this is what I was alluding to with the story is when we allow our unconscious intention, which using the analogy and calling to it, our unconscious intentions are our habits, our beliefs, social and cultural norms. It's the sort of autopilot within our life that we allow to run our life because sometimes we need that. Not every, hmm, I mean, you might disagree with this, and I might disagree with this, but not everything needs constant attention. Sometimes it is okay if we make a choice that works for us in the moment. and it continues to work, it's okay to allow that to become an auto. The catch is when it stops working, we can't over identify with it and continue to hold on to it. That's where the sort of tension occurs, the consternation, the stress, the anxiety that you were alluding to, at least from my perspective, is when we allow the autopilot to run our lives when it's no longer working. And
Right.
we have to recognize that we still have the power to make a choice, but it's difficult because oftentimes bringing attention to the things that are running our life that we need to make different choices for are mundane, commonplace, boring things. And so our brain goes, do we have to address that? Why don't we just go play instead? Why don't we just go have the cup of coffee? Why don't we just eat the cake? The cookie tastes so good.
It works well enough. We've made it this far in our life.
Yeah, it's the toddler. It's like, you had the chicken and the rice for dinner. You can have 10 Oreos. Like,
Yeah.
it's that trade-off where we go, would I rather stay in my awareness and actively address this, or do I want to default to my unconscious intention and let that run my life?
I'm going to use an example to bring it because we do go from unconscious through these steps back to unconscious. And I'm going to use a movement tool. We have 4 stages of movement competence, basically. And you start off with unconscious incompetence. You're not doing it right, but you have no idea that you're not doing it right. It's unconscious, but it's incompetent. Just, it's not good. Then something happens, maybe go to a class or you take training or you bring your attention there and you have conscious incompetence. You know you can't do it and you see you can't do it. You're conscious of the fact that you're incompetent at that. Then you do all the training and you work on it and then you become consciously competent. Kind of like with my martial arts. If I look at my feet, I can watch where they turn, I can get to the right part to do the appropriate move in the right way on my opponent. It's conscious. I have to think about it. I have to make it happen. Then the highest level, when you've really got it, it's unconscious competence. Your body just does it right. And so we do go through the stages, but you have to assume that anything that you haven't put time or attention into is going to be incompetent. It's not going to do it well.
Yeah, and I would say too, there can always be tweaks along the line.
Oh, yeah.
Even if you get to unconscious competence, that doesn't mean that it's perfect. And I think that's the catch. Once you've kind of mastered something and get into that mastery sort of level, this 10,000 hours that cliche that everyone references, when you get to that point, there's a little ego involved. You've put in the time, you've put in the work, you've put in the effort. And that doesn't mean that starting tomorrow that it still works. And that's, for me, that's the real catch here, is being in that space, that openness of, okay, I have spent the time, I have unconsciously mastered, I have unconscious competence of this skill set. And where else can I go? What else is possible? How else can I play with that? And see, to me, that really separates out the masters. That's where the embodiment comes in. It's not just someone that can regurgitate the material. It's not just someone that can embody the material. It's someone that lives in a state of, I have mastered this and I play with it every day and I see how I can tweak it. I see where it can improve. I see where maybe it doesn't work. And so for me, and tying this back in, I think this is where the real practicality comes in with this, in this sense of, and again, I'm leaning in my values of curiosity here, but in that sense of, where can I ask some questions around this? Where can I play with where this is at? Because if it's working for you, great, move on. But a lot of times, these unconscious intentions happen because they are kind of mundane. Again, it's this idea that we've made it unconscious because it's not, we don't want our brain focused around that. And it could be something simple like making a cup of coffee. How aware are you when you're pouring that cup of coffee? I mean, yeah, you might just have to hit a couple buttons on your Keurig and put your little coffee pot under it and wait for it to brew. But how conscious are you of putting in the coffee pot? How conscious are you of what buttons are hitting? How conscious are you as you take your sips of coffee? There's always moments of playing and ability to bring in consciousness. And for me, I think that this can apply outward to anything we do. When we're having a conversation with our spouse, we might both be in unconscious intention or conscious competence of how we run the house. We were just talking about this the other day to make this a real world practical example, but our budget. When my partner and I got married, we went back and forth on who owned the budget. And I put that in quotes for the audience that can't see. And what happened is we started to go years and years and years into our marriage where my partner was kind of running the budget, but then there would be things that would happen. And I would be, my skill set could have helped here. My forward planning, my TE brain, my MBTI. And what I learned is that if I take care of the planning and my partner takes care of the execution, we actually can stick to a freaking budget. And here was the problem. When I got in planning, I went to spreadsheet mode, right? I had formulas and spreadsheets and charts and tables and all this stuff. But I needed that for my brain to run the budget. And what I realized is if I could get it to a commonplace sharing example with my partner and he could decide how he wanted to execute it, all of a sudden there was this ease with our budget. And we've been on top of our money a lot better than we were when one person was just trying to handle it. But I bring that up because in society, in culture, the norm is usually one person handles one thing, one person handles another responsibility. There isn't this sort of joint ownership of anything. And when we allowed ourselves to kind of play with that, it actually opened up more for us. And I think that's where we got out of the unconscious intention of someone has to, because we never outright said it, right? We never said one person has to own this responsibility. It's just kind of what happened because it was unconscious. And when we brought attention to it and we created space around it and we figured out we could jointly handle the different parts playing to our strengths and our own values, it was serendipitous. And now we're in this whole different paradigm with it. And it wasn't anything that we actively actually had to change. It was just bringing attention to something and going, wait a minute, is there a different way we can play with this?
Attention wakes things up. It gives options. So attention is probably the most important skill you can learn here. And I could put it in one other frame, our values. We can have awareness. We could have done the work to recognize our values, to see our values. We can name our values if somebody asks, but we haven't put attention to what that looks like. Where are we living our values? Where aren't we living our values? And then putting intention into actively being them in the mundane things, in the big things, and really activating them in our lives. So the attention makes it more aware. Like maybe we'll notice other people aren't honoring our values, but that doesn't matter as much. Are we expressing them where people can't help but notice them? Our attention brings that to us. Oh my gosh, I'm not actively living in them. I just talk about them, or I am living them, but kind of haphazardly or really small. And then you put intention into actively putting effort into it. And that's how you grow. And then you become it. Then all of a sudden you're living your value in every moment and you can do unconscious competence in your values. And then you get a new project and you have to reevaluate because it'll become incompetence again because it's a new role or a new realm that you're playing with your values. Anyway, so that's another tool.
No, I'm so glad you said that because it was already percolating in the back of my mind. So you just beat me to it. And that's just chef's kiss. So I love that. And here's why. This is another great example of awareness, attention, and intention. Attention and intention. We are aware of our values. We've done the work, the internal work to list our values. When we have conversations about it, when you and I podcast weekly about it, when our viewers listen to our podcast weekly, and they are consistently hearing mention of values and purpose and where are you coming from, that repetition builds a new skill and a new muscle. And so when we have conversations on our Discord forums and with you and I or colleagues or whoever, and we're constantly framing it in that mindset, we are constantly turning that lens, that attention back to what are our values? What is my purpose? And when that happens, like you said, you can create that framework of how do I want to use this going forward? Where is my intention going forward? Where else can I use my values going forward? And for me, I actually have the counter example to this, where at work, a lot of times, if I'm really getting into my unconscious intention and I'm just kind of blinders on, trying to nose to the grindstone, get work done, I've slowly learned now to catch when I'm out of my values, because all of a sudden I'll be in a conversation or a heated topic. It might not even be an argument per se or a fight, but it's just heated, right? There's definitely some varying opinions that are not agreeable. And I've learned over time by constantly bringing attention to my values that I can, when I get into these conversations now, I can have the intention of staying in my value of curiosity. And what's serendipitous for me in that is when I have the courage to sit there and figure out a question to ask, things completely change. And all it was bringing attention to something and making a slightly different choice. And I don't know. I mean, sometimes the question gets blown over and we move on, but a lot of times, 90%, 9 out of 10 times, by just asking a question, it diffuses the conversation or pivots it in a different way. And that's just because it's my value, right? I'm not saying every time someone asks a question that creates value towards the conversation, but because I have brought attention and awareness to what my purpose is and what my values are, and I am choosing to come from that space with intention, that's what creates the difference in the world around me. That's how I am affecting my shadow casting.
That's when you're casting out you, not something you were taught, not an old habit, casting stuff that you didn't intend that's maybe uncomfortable or icky or whatever. No, through curiosity, you cast Dave out into the world in a really positive, purposeful way. And that's cool. And that's what we want all of the people listening, all of our audience to breathe into, because it feels really good. Even when you're in struggle, once you're moving from your values and your purpose, it just feels better. The struggle has usefulness. It's not just something happening to you. And yeah, I'd like to invite our audience, if you have any questions about these, if we didn't express them in a clear way, leave us a note. We'd love to hear from you. Also, lean into these. What does it feel like to be in attention? What does it feel like to have an intention and you're starting to act and you're moving in a direction? What does that feel like? And what does it feel like when you bring attention back to it? And just play with those two energies and feel how they kind of shift each other. One is like hard fought, you actually have to work for it, and the other one kind of just changes you and it feels good. And it's an interesting thing when you allow attention to do its work.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And I think those are some great questions for our audience. I'm really looking forward to hearing the replies. I think I'm just going to set the intention and bring attention to our podcast. So make sure to comment to this podcast. Be sure to give us a like, subscribe so that you know when new podcasts are coming out, and share it out. If you think that you have friends or family that are living in intention, maybe this podcast will help bring some attention to where they can make some different choices in their life. And hopefully this opened up some areas in your own life where you can have a little bit more space to make maybe a different choice to bring attention to something in your life. And until next time,
See ya.